You're tuning into the Wild, Weird, and Sometimes Normal podcast. If you have a story or a guest recommendation that you think others need to hear, email me at wildweirdandsometimesnormal@gmail.com. Let's get this started. Alex and Brett, kick it!
Wild. Wild. Weird. And sometimes wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. And sometimes normal.
On this episode, I'm joined by Chicago playwright and actress Kat Evans. Kat has a play premiering in Chicago May 5th and 7th, 2024, that centers around the true story of Pastor David Swing being charged with heresy. Our conversation spans Chicago, the Fourth Presbyterian Church, spirituality, the role of religion in today's society, and how politics may have filled that void. Kat is a phenomenal guest, and we had an actual conversation about topics that usually get shouted down in the online world. It was a lot of fun, and I hope you give her a follow. Her play is free, but you do need tickets from Eventbrite, where you can stream online. When you meet up with Kat after the show, let her know you heard her on Wild and Weird. Enjoy the show. Are you looking to buy a home in New Jersey? Escape the city and move to the suburbs? Finally purchase a vacation home on the lake or down the shore? Maybe you're one of the lucky ones who are retiring and moving out of state. If so, let me help you. Keller Williams and the Real Estate Professional Group have what you need to make your goals come true. Reach out and have a conversation with someone who will put you first. Contact Brian McCoach at 856-321-1212 or email brianmccoach@kw.com. Are you looking for CBD for your pet? My friends at Pure Pet Wellness have what you need. They use the highest quality ingredients. While other companies may use synthetic oils in their CBD, Pure Pet Wellness uses organic ingredients, organically grown hemp, organic coconut oil, organic shea butter, organic beeswax, and that's just to name a few. A family-owned and operated company that also offers fast shipping. Go to purepetwellness.com for all your pet's CBD needs and use the discount code WILD and WEIRD at checkout. That's WILD, A-N-D, WEIRD. Treat your animal right. Go to purepetwellness.com. Welcome to another episode of Wild, Weird, and Sometimes Normal. I'm your host, Brian, and today my guest is Kat Evans. She is a playwright and actress based out of Chicago. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. So we're chatting a little beforehand. I lived in Chicago for a few years. I deeply miss it. I love New Jersey now. I'm back home, but deeply miss Chicago. Such a great time out there.
I love my city fiercely. I'm sure Chicago misses you.
I feel it every day. I wake up, I just hear this calling. I'm like, what is? Oh, it must be Chicago saying they miss me. So we didn't get to cover. Are you North Side or South Side?
I live on the north side. I live in Uptown, which if you're not familiar with Chicago, that's about a mile north of Wrigley Field and pretty close to the lake.
Excellent. So the Cubs, so now I'm Philadelphia suburbs, and that's the Philadelphia Phillies and all that stuff. And they're in the National League, like the Cubs. But when you're out in Chicago, you have to pick North Side or South Side. I live in the North Side, so it was like, oh, well, I like the Cubs, I'm going to go. And whenever the Phillies came, I would go. But I can't be a traitor. I can't wear like a Cubs hat or a Cubs t-shirt or anything like that. So I'd have like a Chicago shirt or, just like whatever. And I'm always, and I just love the concept of like the North Side. Like, this is our whole thing, like North Side. And I always try to, even now, I still look like, oh, can I find a shirt that just says North Side? But it always has like the Cubs logo on there. And I just cannot do that to my team. If it was an American league, like maybe I could talk myself into it, but I just can't do it.
Well, now that I adjunct at IIT, and that is basically across the street or across the highway from Sox, the White Sox on the South Side. So I feel my heart is divided. I just love my city and I want to support all of our teams. So, and of course the North Side, South Side debates and general stigma, it's definitely not the healthiest. So I'm really trying to unify both sides of Chicago in my heart and feel like I love them both, but I do live on the North Side.
I think as an individual, you can do this. I have faith in you in unifying like a sit down with the top members of the South Side and the North Side, and you can work this out.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's possible. But there's love in our hearts for our city.
So one other thing that I found, interesting and also like just very different for Chicago was Chicagoland. And it's just, this general swath of land that is actually like the distance from Philadelphia to the Jersey Shore is smaller than what Chicagoland is considered. So they're like, oh, we have IndyCar races in Chicagoland. I'm like, great, like that's great. Like, how do you have all this in your city? Oh, well, it's 90 miles away. Like, what are you talking about? That's not that's like another state. But good for them for marketing. Like, we're just gonna take everything that is like within a day drive and just call it Chicagoland.
Mhm. Yeah, and there is a certain suburban pride that exists as well. I don't generally love going out to the suburbs, but I still love everyone who lives there. And every now and then, when you see a piece of culture that is a suburb specific, like say Mean Girls takes place in Evanston, or if you saw the more recent 8-Bit Christmas, it takes place in Batavia. And there are some very specific Chicago suburb jokes and lore that are, really dear to those folk. And or say Breakfast Club,
It's
right,
like
which
John
took
Hughes.
place in
Like,
Shermer, Illinois.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, the Chicago suburbs, we have love for them too.
Yeah. As long as they come visit you. You're like, I might not come to you, but if you come to me, it's fine. I can help you broker the peace treaty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Indeed.
All right, let's jump into the good stuff. You are a playwright. You have an exciting new play in the works coming out, right? What's happening?
I do. My play is called Perseverance of the Saints, which, if you are up on your Protestant theology, that is one of the 5 points of Calvinism. In my philosophical heart, it's the one, kind of the only one I like. I might be a 1-point Calvinist, but the play is about a heresy trial that happened in Chicago in 1874. I was doing research on the history of the Fourth Presbyterian Church, which still exists today. It's across from the Hancock Building on Michigan Avenue. It's a fancy, beautiful, beautiful church, and it's been in existence for over 150 years. So I was researching their history, and I came across this story that 3 years after the Chicago fire, the pastor of that church was really progressive, emphasizing things like love and forgiveness and improving ourselves morally rather than hell. And he was very happy to do things like kick bad theology out the window. So things like, did somebody tell you your baby went to hell because it wasn't baptized? Yeah, that's stupid. Nobody thinks that anymore. Get rid of that. He was very happy to just be like, throw it out the window. If it's hurting people and if it's leading people away from God, get rid of it. So, of course, the East Coast and a lot of powerful people put him on trial for heresy.
And this is all a true story?
This is everything I just told you is true.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, so I found that story. Go ahead.
No, well, I don't know if like I'm divided religiously or, spiritually, wherever I'm at. It always kind of changes every day when I wake up. But I always do find it interesting that, there's so many different religions. And it's like, if you didn't pick the right guy, if you're not backing the right horse, like everyone else just goes to hell. Like that just seems like a crazy concept. And if you were born, which is Christianity as a general, term. So prior to 2000 years ago, if you were anything else, like you're just in hell. So it's only from 2000 years, just very strange concepts. I kind of like hey, be nice to each other, improve yourself morally, and, clean your bedroom before you go and clean the street type of deal, and, get your house in order, and I think that's pretty good. So what happened with this pastor, with this reverend?
With this particular trial, he was exonerated. The jury was one pastor and one elder from every Presbyterian church in Chicagoland at the time, which was a lot. And also in this particular trial, anyone could ask questions. So the entire jury could pipe up at any moment. So the trial is 800 pages long, which I found and I was reading. But what happened was they exonerated him mostly because Chicago was like, screw you, Princeton, get out of our city. They very much felt that this was an East Coast attack. So they found him innocent, but his heart was broken by the trial. The meanness of it, the mean-spiritedness, the attacks of it just put him through the ringer. And so he withdrew. He withdrew from the presbytery, which meant he promised to never, ever work in a Presbyterian church ever again. So denomination and denominational theology was a really powerful force at this time. And I think it still is today. I think, as you've mentioned, there's a lot more openness and collaboration and a lot more theological points that people can be like, oh, we disagree. We can still have lunch together now. But at this point, it was trial worthy. So anyway, he withdrew from the presbytery. And then so many people loved him in Chicago that they were like, come back, come back. So he started his own church and took half the congregation of Fourth Presbyterian with him. So he ended up doing a lot of damage to the church that loved him and supported him because he started his own and took half the congregants, which also meant taking half the donors, which caused a huge ruckus. And it was rough at the time.
So his breakaway parish that he's doing, is this a Presbyterian sect as well, or is this?
No, the church he started
on?
was his new church was undenominational.
Okay. No, all right.
Which meant no creeds.
Yeah, everyone's welcome. You see a lot of that with, it's like a new age church, you would call that now, but a lot of people are just more open. Hey, everybody come in. And that's kind of better too. Like we have enough division in our daily lives, on the news, or whatever you might want. But like, if we're all just trying to get to be better people, maybe you should focus on that more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The dangers of non-denominational is that there's no, for lack of a better term, constitution, right? There's no rules and regulations. So there's nothing to fall back on as like a founding principle, which is what theology is supposed to be for. It's like a constitution so that we can say, oh, well, when we disagree, what do we refer to help us? And so in undenominational spaces, generally whoever's in charge can do whatever they want. And so if they want change, they can make all the change in the world, whether that change is for good or for ill, because they have unbridled power. So the idea, at least with Presbyterianism as a denomination, it's highly democratic in nature, which means a lot of elected representatives and a lot of voting. So in many ways, people love Presbyterian because it's so democratic. And it also means progress happens at a snail's pace because you have to do everything by committee. And then you get reports from your committee to the larger committee. And then there's a vote and there's always debate. So things happen very slowly. So in an undenominational space or in any kind of religious organization where the leader is the ultimate authority, you can get a lot done, but you can also do a lot of damage.
There's a lot of coloring outside the lines.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about your religious. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, so I mean, Joseph Smith with Mormonism, that there were times where things that he wrote down, with his golden goggles, and then went back with I may have misread that. Hold on 1 second. Like, it actually says I can have 40 wives, but you can only have the one, and I might even take yours. Sorry, there was a little footnote. And in some of the other non-denominationals, we were church shopping for a while, like through the pandemic, and it was nice that you could tune in and just watch things. I grew up Catholic, so we would go. I like the comfort of like some of the songs, just the melody of it, or whatever. They have the incense that they burn, has a nice smell to it, and it's just like, comfort of childhood or whatever. But as you get older and you're trying to come to terms with some of the directions they may have went that you fully 100% don't agree upon, and then also just getting older, like, where did you get this information from, and like, how's this backed up? So it gets to be a little interesting. So we would tune into some non-denominational ones. And also with the Catholic, so typically you have a priest. I know a male priest. They have let some females, I believe, in, but for the majority, it's male priests who are never married to God, love God, but they're telling me like right and wrong. But it's like, okay, like I have a wife, I have a family, like I'm a person, I have a job, like I have all these things that are competing to like take me away from like salvation's like a great, but whatever. But like lead me down a road, and it's like hard to be a perfect person. But you're telling me, but you have like zero experience in this. Like, our donations are going to you. Like, you don't pay anything, like your food, like everything's free to you as long as people come and donate money. Then I'm sure, there's a higher, the diocese or whatever give you money to help out the smaller parishes. So like all of your stuff, it's very easy. Now, granted, you took that vow and whatever you might do and have to hope you're keeping it. But it's hard to tell me like I'm not on the right path when you don't have these daily issues you have to deal with. But then some of the non-denominational ones you go to, it's pretty cool that the person talking to you, male or female, is married, they have kids, they did all this stuff. But then, again, this broad brush here, a lot of it seems to come down to like, hey, when I was hooked on meth for 10 years, but now I'm born again. And it's like, like, all right, I love your behind the music story of like the dark drug days. I was like, but like, maybe I need like somewhere finer in the middle. I don't know.
Yeah. So what you brought up with the lack of experience in life from clergy in the Catholic Church, it just reminded me of in a lot of different faiths, there is some sect that's interested in asceticism, right? Which is like the monastic, which is in many, many faiths, you need to withdraw from the world. You need to strip yourselves of worldly pleasures. We need to be less attached and whatever, whether that's a monastic order or, nuns and whatever, like there's some sort of like withdrawal from the world and a denial of the world, like that's a more holy path. And then there's usually a sect that says, no, if you're really going to live a spiritual life, you have to embrace the world and bring the holiness of your God or whatever it is your faith is into the world. And those factions are there, I think, in nearly every religious tradition.
It makes it interesting. Again, this isn't equal to like we're talking about with religion though. But like, if you want to cut sugar out of your life, like, oh, I'm not going to have cookies, I'm not going to have chocolate. Hey, maybe in the first couple of days it's hard, but then after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you build on this success. And it's a lot easier. Like, oh, I used to have creamer in my coffee, and like whatever the crazy flavor, I think, the Girl Scout flavor, I got to get this. Oh, the pumpkin spice, let me get this. And I would go through a bottle of that a week. And then one time I just turned it over the back. I was like, this is 3,000 calories that I'm drinking a week. Cut it out. I drink black coffee, just like cold turkey, and only drink black coffee. I am ahead of the times for when the zombie apocalypse comes. Everybody else is going to have to adjust their coffee consumption. I'm already ahead.
Already there.
I'm already there.
Up.
Right. But after, it may have been hard. It wasn't hard for this, but it may have been hard to give up like whatever you're trying to do. I'm not going to drink sober October, dry January, whatever it is. After a couple of weeks, like you're good at it. If you're going to walk away from the world, one, I'm like having a hard time putting it in words. It's like the trust fund kid. Like, obviously you can, if someone's paying for you, like, where are you eating? Where are you getting shelter? Look, fine. You're going to go be a monk in the Himalayan mountains and live there, and they're going to pay for everything for you. But after a while, it just has to become easier when you decide, I am cutting this tie. I am not doing it, versus I am going to try to live into the world and be virtuous or live by a good example, while also being tempted by all the things that, whatever, everybody has their vices that they're, trying to overcome or do. But
then you've uncovered a major question there, which is, do we need to give up things that are hurting us, or that give up things that are hurting others? Or is just being in the world itself a problem? Right. So like that, the virtue isn't saying, yes, I will give up being a parent. I will give up community, or whatever that is. Like, I need to be alone. And there's all kinds of different levels of why do we give things up, or why do we say no? And I think you've mentioned, like meth, but like addiction is clearly a disease that often gets associated with sin. And we've got big debates about how to help with that, because for years, centuries, right, there was like, why can't you just get it together? And we are like, why are you so bad? And of course, addicts make a lot of bad choices and can hurt a lot of people when they're under the influence of whatever, as we all do when we're under the influence. However, there's a really big difference between suffering the disease of addiction and just being selfish, right? And doing things that hurt the people around you, or voting in such a way that hurt people far away from you, but who are still people, right? There's a lot of sins to go around, and we have, I think we all turn to religion and community as guidance on like, how do we make these decisions? How do I be in the world? How do I relate to my neighbors? And how do we live next door to one another when we disagree?
I really, and this isn't like breaking news for anybody, but like there used to be communities built around, I guess your religion or whatever, but there was, Irish neighborhoods and there was Italian neighborhoods, and they pretty much had the same faith for what they were doing. And now everything's broken down so much that like here, I'm not even going to church, so I'm not seeing anybody. But the times that I might go to church, I don't even know who these people are. Like it's definitely not my direct neighbor. It's not the guy across the street. We don't have these conversations based on faith or goodness or whatever it is. It's like, hey, the lawn's looking good over there. Hey, I can't believe that lawn. Look at that lawn. Oh, right. Hey, you really edged really good. But like, it's really, I think, broken down society a little bit. And this, like, you don't have to go join religion to do this. Like, your religion can just be like, I'm going to be a good person. I really think the golden rule, if people did more of that, that might have like religious undertones, but would get people a lot further than where they're going. Like, if you're voting, it's tough. It's tough out there. Your vote matters. But then also, like, what they do with your vote, like, you're not directly voting for that. Like, you don't get to vote on every single issue. So you're also putting somebody in charge who you think is going to do what you want. And you're like, oh my God, like my vote just went to like murdering a million people in Yemen. Like, I didn't mean to do that. But it's also then hard to
Yeah.
be responsible. It's easy for me to wash this away. Like, I'm not responsible for what's happening overseas and everything like that. But, I think if you just focus smaller, try to do your right thing. And if everybody did that, the world had this pie in the sky stuff here, but, the world could be a
Yeah.
little better.
Well, and we have information about what's going on the other side of the world, which a century ago, that would have been a lot harder to get a hold of that information. But now we have immediate information that there's genocide happening, or there's an oil spill, or something terrible happens, and we find out and we care. And then, at least for those of us that are relatively privileged living in America, we find out, wow, I'm privileged enough to be here, and I'm privileged enough to know this information, but what can I do about it? What power do I have to affect the situation? And so we're posting on Facebook, or we're retweeting things that we believe in or that we agree with. And we're maybe talking to our neighbors, and we're maybe calling our reps, and maybe we're donating money. Or maybe we're going to a protest. Beyond that, we often feel like we don't have any power to affect the situation. And that's demoralizing to a certain extent, which is like, it's not that I don't care, but what can I effectively contribute to this, to alter this travesty that's happening somewhere else? Not that there aren't travesties happening right here to our neighbors. But you brought up another thing that I was thinking of about the personal, and like, we're all on our own journey. And one of the things I've been thinking for a long time is that spirituality is personal. Everybody is on their own journey, and whether they want to use a word like faith or not, spirituality is so personal. For me, religion is communal. It only exists because a group comes together to say, we will do this together. We will live together. We will abide by certain things. We will have an identity. And so when I hear somebody, claim a religion, but who doesn't practice it in any way, shape, or form, I want to say, well, tell me more about your spirit. Because I have no idea what your religion is if you're not practicing and you're not with community and you're not doing anything with anyone. You still have a soul, and your beliefs still matter. I really want to know about them. What do you think of that?
I think that's a good point. I think a lot of people, one, I think a lot of people grew up in like a bad religious environment, or, maybe their grandparents or their parents were like, a little too crazy, a little too heavy into it, and then forced them to do things. So now, they just see, I'm not religious. I'm not religious. I would truly like that. And it's also cool not to be religious. Like, oh, I don't follow any religion. I'm just on my own thing. I would truly like to know the numbers of people who just think that we showed up on this earth, we live here, we die, and there's just darkness afterwards. Like, that's a very sad existence. Like, you truly think, I don't know what happens after we die. I mean, are we going to stand on a white cloud? Is, St. Peter checking his clipboard? Am I on the VIP list? Am I getting in? Am I have to wait? Am I in limbo? Is this limbo? Like, there's tons of questions. Or do we just go to this bright light in the sky and we are all energy? Which, that could be that too. But if you have nothing, you're just lost, like in a rowboat in a circle, just going, but you think you're going somewhere. But I just find that very sad. It would be nice. Some towns have like their town cleanup day or whatever. Hey, you show up, we're all gonna meet this park, and we're gonna pick up trash, and we're gonna go do this, and we're gonna go, march and show everybody that we care, that, hey, South Jersey is the best of the Jersey, and all this stuff. And I think that's good too. To have, you need that community. Religion, I think, automatically provides that community, and then people who are spiritual, I think for the most part tend to do that in the private. They're not out there. There's nothing to thump on. I don't have a Bible. Like, I'm just spiritual. Like, I need that. Thumping on air is, nothing.
Yeah. And it's certainly there's plenty of research out there that Christianity is on the decline in terms of people who claim that religion as their own. Those numbers have been tanking for years. It's not new. It's been going on for most of the 20th century, especially in what we call like the mainline Protestant denominations, which at one point were the dominant cultural force in the United States. All of them are decreasing. And then there's a lot of debate about why. Meanwhile, we have these new political affiliations. And I know that mixing politics and religion is not new, but we are currently in an era of Christian nationalism going on an off the charts joyride. And a lot of folks that are terrified of that. and finding it to be the least Christ-like thing they've ever heard, and just feeling bewildered about how did this rhetoric get out there? How did this movement get so much power? How did they hijack so much of our political system? And it's terrifying. And that, to me, that feels not very religious at all, but it's certainly real and it's certainly powerful and it's having real world results.
But so I hear that. But the counter, there's not another religious movement to say, like, okay, that one's not good, but follow this one instead. It just seems that the religion is politics now. That, like, I don't even, I'm not even fully sure what I'm saying yes to, but I know that my guy said it, and that's what I'm saying yes to. Like, we used to be in and I think we could be polar opposites of where we are politically. And I think if we talked about what our thoughts were, we would find that we're actually closer together than we are further apart. And social media and all this stuff has people on the opposite end screaming at each other. And I think that's, I definitely think there's people that are like that. I think that's a smaller majority. It's the loud minority that's coming out and screaming that. But there's not another, so if you're like, hey, we're going to do Christian nationalism, like, okay, not great. I'm not signing up for, I don't want to do A, B, and C. But there's not, the alternative is not religious. It is just follow me for whatever the political thing that I'm screaming about.
Yeah. And a lot of folks who have power, especially in terms of media buy, right, will put out whatever headline gets them more clicks, thinking less and less about, is this a well-reasoned argument, or is this worth the bandwidth? Is this what we want people to be at the forefront of people's minds? They're like, no, I need clicks because I need to get this bottom line up. And that's influencing the information we're consuming. But I agree, there's not an obvious alternative to the Christian national movement, but that is perhaps philosophically necessary, that as soon as any religious movement is concerned with being the rival, again, we're just jumping into being obsessed with power. I don't know that philosophically that makes for any good religious movement from any religion. And everything I'm talking about for the last half hour has been mostly Christian denominations jockeying for position, right? And of course, our world is so full of more religions than that. Christianity has been the dominant cultural force in the United States, but boy, we're not the only idea out there. And Chris, I'm using we very broadly.
Right, and statistically, Christianity is the minority of that. If you're going to look at, Hinduism or, Muslim,
The entire world, probably.
Right. It is a small faction that just happens. I'm not even sure what the numbers are in the United States, but I would think it's probably higher than others currently are.
Well, there's got to be some sort of stat. I should probably Google this, where because Christianity was very much aligned with most of colonialism, right? It spread often to other people's duress, that they were forcing Christianity on other lands. And so that's why it's planted in so many different places, because many empires that were colonizing other places were like, yep, got to send the missionaries and got to make this place a more of a Christian thing, which in this day and age, we're thinking a lot more about, like, oh, maybe that colonization effort was doing a lot more harm than good.
It definitely makes it tough. We're going to sit back and look at all the history. We're going to spend more time of like trying to fix it than like, what can we actually do now? I think. And also, so we're talking about, religion being for the community. And again, it's so cool not to be religious. It's so cool to be like, I don't believe in anything, man. Like, we're all just here. And I have friends who, I have one buddy who goes over to Hagen and helps rebuild. He builds houses, he rebuilds schools, he does hospitals, and it's part of the church that he's in. And that is so awesome. That, like, he goes, and I do none of this stuff, like I do, but he's out there like walking the walk and doing that. Now I'm sure why they're out there, maybe they're spreading the message or the word. But hey, if somebody rebuilt my house, like, I'll listen to everything. Like, hey, timeshares for an hour, great, man. Like, you just rebuilt my house, like, I'm in. So maybe it's like a fair trade-off, or whatever. But the people who are too cool for school for this stuff, but what are you doing to improve life or society or someone else's life? Like being a Twitter troll or just being, this downer the whole time. There's nothing greater than what you're doing right now, which isn't amazing. It's really just like at crossroads, I think.
Yeah, I was really close to somebody who was a card-carrying humanist. And I thought, oh, yes, tell me all about humanism. What are you doing? How are you organizing to help the human race? Like, tell me all about it. And he was like, no, basically, whenever we see a religious campaign, we just make sure we take out a counter campaign to make fun of them because we hate because we hate organized religion. And I was like, oh, well, I get it. There's a lot to hate. But also, I mean, if you're going to say I'm a card carrying, I have a card, I'm affiliated with the humanists. Tell me, like, do something for humankind, please. There's a lot of wonderful ways to do good in the world. And yes, I think you can do more good when you're organized, whether that means a religion or a political affiliation or a not for profit. Right? There's a lot of good that can be done out there.
Comedians want, their entire job is like to shit on things or whatever. But there's also like the merry pranksters. This is a couple decades ago. They would go around and do this like organized kind of chaos type of thing. Like that was their job and they were getting paid. But if your whole thing is just like, oh, we oppose organized religion. Oh, we're the West Baptist Borough Church or whatever it is that has a problem with every single person and
everybody.
Like, what are you doing? Like, hey, war's not great. Well, I shouldn't be all over the world doing all this stuff. But if a soldier dies, like they're American, like that's supposed to be like our common fabric, and you're out there protesting and like celebrate, like really strange stuff. Also, hey, guess what? We live in the future. This is the future right now. Move. Go wherever you want that is not here, that you want to go start your own movement and like go to a little island and do your thing.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the things that's in my play is this very Protestant practice of I disagree with you. I'm going to call you a heretic and I'm going to start my own thing. Right. That's a Protestant practice starting with the Reformation, right? With Martin Luther banging these 95 theses on a Catholic door, being like, here are all the problems I have with the current institution, such as selling forgiveness in the form of papal indulgences, right? It's like, that's not what we should be doing. And eventually, right, we have this whole split and Protestantism is born. But it doesn't take long before that Protestant church splits into other sects, and all of Europe. Now we have Lutherans, and then eventually we get Methodists and we get Presbyterians. We come to the United States, we get Baptists. No, there's Anabaptists in Europe before that. But anyway, Protestantism splinters because it doesn't take very long before I disagree with you. We can't play in the same sandbox anymore. I've got to start my own thing. We can't have lunch with you anymore. So despite the fact that reforming and rethinking the past to me is such a beautiful thing and a faithful thing, there's this really ugly practice of suddenly slamming the door on our neighbors because we disagree.
So out of all that, I got that Martin Luther invented Festivus. He's like, I've got a lot of problems with you people.
That's a really great theory. We should check the internet for that.
He may have started. Let's see if he had to put up a metal pole to it. We'll see. There was feats of strength. I'm not too sure. It is a problem. So then I guess there's more land to go to. So it was easier to be like, you know what, screw you people. I'm taking my ball. I'm leaving. We're going to go move 10 miles that way, which is a 7-month journey. We'll never see you ever again. But now, your neighbor, you're sitting here like, I completely disagree with you. I can't have this. I can't believe that you're Muslim across the street and you're Jewish over this side and you're Hindu over here. Like I got a lot of problems with you people. And it's like, we can't do that anymore. Like we have to try to find like the common ground of whatever it is. And I understand, but hey, I follow the news and I see stuff in the Middle East and I see, people talking about, hey, the people you're supporting would not support you if you were over there. Like I get all that. In America, as of this recording, we're not having, for the most part, these, people flying off buildings, whatever it might be, as they don't agree with their religious beliefs. So I understand that. United States, maybe we can focus more on, you got to come together a little bit, find that common ground to drive forward to better society.
Yeah. So what you mentioned about it being really cool to not follow organized religion. So you've heard the phrase, "Oh, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious."
I think I just told you that.
Yeah.
That might have been my line.
I mean, tell me if you know anything different, or if your listeners know anything different. Please write in and give me more historical context. As far as I understand it, that phrase, "we're spiritual, not religious," comes from AA, the Alcoholics Anonymous program, which is, if you're not familiar, which is a 12-step support group to help folks who are in recovery. And then there's an other segment that called Al-Anon, which is to help all the family members and loved ones of addicts, right? And so this 12-step program developed in the early 20th century. One of their tenets was, this is a spiritual program, but we are unaffiliated with any particular religion, and we refuse to define God in any way. Everybody gets to have their own higher power They can define it however they want. There are no creeds. We're only here to help each other get with recovery. So we're very spiritual. We need to acknowledge this higher power because addiction has become our higher power, and we're trying to transfer the deed, right? We're trying to get out of addiction and into another space. And so that phrase, as far as I know, got published there and then actually became like one of the most popular adopted ideas of general, not pop culture, but into the culture of America, which is like, yeah, why do we need to care about creeds? Why do we need to subscribe to any particular religion? I can be spiritual. Do you know, does that track for you? Do you have any information to add or contradict anything I just said?
So one of the podcasts I listen to, it's called Tinfoil Hat by Sam Tripoli. He's a comedian. And then he also talks about like a lot of conspiracy stuff. So like aliens and fun things like that. This one those my podcast touches on. So he is very public with his AA journey that he's on. I have zero research on this. This is headline news for you of I did not read the article. He has said several times that there was going to be a 13th step and it was actually converting to Christianity at the end of it. But then people were kind of falling off like, hey man, like I'm on board. I kind of like what you're doing, but like, I'd rather not join your religion. So possibly then, the founder was like, let's just make it 12. We like even numbers anyway, 13, bad luck, all that stuff. Let's just say spirituality in general. And like, hey, then you're in and hey, good luck. Maybe I should start embracing 13 more. I could go for a couple billion.
Works for her.
It works for her. So I don't know if this is fake news I'm telling you or not, but apparently the 13th was to I guess get baptized and join a Christian like religion. And then people are like, well, I kind of rather battle the bottle than go to church.
Yeah. I never heard that story, but I also have nothing to contradict it, but I'm glad they got rid of it.
Yeah. I think it opens it up for more people. It's also so we talked about you looking back at history and there's all this baggage and you try to deal with it now. And like, hey, we took this land from the natives and who was there before the natives? Maybe they took it, and we're all in the Caribbean and the British are all over there and they're colonizing people. Very hard to deal with now. Very hard to unwind hundreds of years of things. I didn't do it. Also a great cop out. But at the same time, like, what are we going to do here? Like I'm just giving up.
What do we do
Where
now?
am I living? Right. What do we do now? Hard conversation. That's also the hard with religion too. Is like I'm looking back at 2,000 years of precedent of acts that were done in the name of this, and it's easy. And then also in modern times, you're looking, throughout the 40s and 50s, with Catholicism, and into modern times, even like the Boy Scouts and things like that. It's like, well, I wouldn't stick my kid in like the Boy Scouts. I wouldn't stick my son in there. But also, like 99% of the Boy Scouts are perfectly fine people. But then you hear it on the news, and unfortunately, that becomes like the top thing. It's also very easy, I think, to walk away. Like, I don't want to be part of this thing. Like, this is a terrible thing to be part of. Like, if the British colonists were the colonizers, there was a British basketball team. Hey, we're the colonizers. This is what we go. And it'd be hard to wear their merchandise as you're walking around the street. Hey, go colonizers! Like, go get them. Like, I'd have to like step back, from that. But also, you don't have to throw the baby out the bathwater. Like, hey, what can we do? What can we do now to bring this up to our modern society? And some of that kind of sounds like non-denominational, where they're able to just like wipe that slate clean. And like, hey, what you guys grew up with, we kind of like that message. We also like the message that we have a family and we're married, we have jobs, and we can do things a little bit better.
Well,
but it also kind of takes community out of it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, it's the idea of amending the Constitution, right? Which is that like there's no one document that's going to be relevant for the rest of eternity. And if you want to think of, a lot of people think of the Bible also as some sort of literal how to live guide instead of this incredibly complex, written by many, many authors over many hundreds of years, educational thing where we can dive forever into all the different meanings and all the different translations and the different ways to understand different parables or, passages. Like there's a lot to unpack there. And it's not just a open the book and here's the answer on how to make my decision down the block. But anyway, back to the idea of sometimes we need to alter the founding document that is our governing document, right? Even the Constitution or the bylaws of your not-for-profit, or maybe the laws in your city, which is, oh, this particular law turns out it's racist, or it turns out this law really hurts this group of people or really, really privileges this very tiny group of people. That's not a good law. We're going to have to repeal that or amend that. And that, of course, requires debate and agreement and votes, and it takes longer than we want it to. But hopefully it means it's a process of discernment. And I think one of the things that made me think of when you said baby with bathwater, it's like, right, we'd love to just burn it all down, but really, you're going to do that to City Hall? Are we going to
Some people might say yes.
Yeah, exactly. Which is, us. I totally get that stance. What are we going to do instead?
Well, I think that's a problem with, current society now, is everybody wants to reform all this stuff. But it's like, what's the next step? I hear you. I hear there's a problem. I hear this is your solution. Like, what's step number 2? And we don't have a lot of that. We have a lot of everything is reactive or rarely proactive. And like, hey, let's take, we're talking about the Christian nationalism, driving one side or whatever. Like, okay, what's the counter? What is let's do this, let's do this, let's do that. Like, it's not that. It's like, we're not going to do that. Like, well, that's not really an alternative.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing to drive the other part of the conversation?
Yeah, I suppose
it's a counter offer, like offer, counter offer. It's not just reject.
The counter offer I'd like to make to Christian nationalism is, in fact, democracy, which we should already have. I just went to a Chicago institution known as the Neo-Futurists. Do you remember them?
No, I don't know them.
Oh, they've been running since the 80s. They used to run a show called Too Much Light Makes the Baby Go Blind. There were some copyright issues. The show is now called The Infinite Wrench. And the idea
someone else trademarked the baby go blind. Like, that's
I'm sure they had their own legal struggles. And long-standing Chicago theater company. But the idea is they do 30 plays in 60 minutes, and they roll a dice every week, and then they replace however many plays with whatever's on the die roll. So you're seeing new plays every week, and they're about 2 minutes long. And one of the things I heard just this last couple weeks ago was, and they always speak as themselves. They rarely play characters, right? They're usually speaking from their own point of view. Is one of the actors said, one of the conservative things from my upbringing that I have not been able to shake is that I think democracy has potential, and I would like our society to be one. And I wanted to applaud. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm with you. And maybe that is, I don't tend to think of that as conservative, but if it is, fine. I do think democracy has potential, and I would like our society to become one.
Well, I think this is part of the problem
these days.
They just had, I'm trending into politics a little bit here, maybe a lot of it, but they just had some bill 2-3 weeks ago. We're going to give more money to Ukraine, we're going to give money to Israel, and we're going to protect the border. And that was 3 in 1. And then some people are like, well, I don't want to give money over here, so I'm not voting for any of it. Someone else, I don't want to give money over here, so I'm not voting for any of it. We are at the time in our society, one, we're voting somebody, whoever it might be. You're voting Donald Trump, Joe Biden. They're gonna make your head decisions for you. They're gonna sign the bill or not. Well, Joe Biden, Donald Trump don't stand for everything that I stand for, and now giving all the power back to, hey, power to people, right? That's the whole point of it. But all these bills, they like to, they're dog-eared. Like, oh, I'm going to, in this, it's going to be $1 million to the park in my city. And it's really the Patriot Act. We're also patriot against each other. We're all patriots here. We want to save the world. Like, okay, well, like mass surveillance and like data gathering, and we're taking our shoes off the airport forever. Like, I didn't really vote for you to vote for that. But like, we need to break these things down in smaller pieces. I could pay my taxes online and all this stuff. It seems pretty secure. Like, I still get my refund or whatever. Like, why can't we vote on more individual pieces instead of, hey, you have 10 minutes to read this 10,000 page bill that like we just made overnight. Like, definitely have not been sitting on this for years, making sure all the words are completely ambiguous, and we'll never be able to figure out the true definition and argue for everything and screw the people in the end. But like, where is that? Like, I just don't understand that.
Yeah. What I mentioned earlier about us feeling powerless. We have all these choices, especially consumer choices, and we're accustomed to getting what we want. I mean, like, well, I want this and not that. And then it comes to these very large moral issues that have huge impact on humankind. And we're like, I want to have a say in this. Doesn't my vote do that? No. Turns out my vote is really, really removed from, but that's the only power I have is this, local elections, and which of course most people don't vote in. Friends, please vote in your local elections. Your vote counts more.
Some of the most important things are local elections.
The most important things, please register to vote. Vote in your local elections, friends. Yes. And, there's all kinds of things in our two-party system at the federal level that we don't have a lot of control over anymore. Not that couldn't change. Those laws could be changed. It's a lot of difficult work.
Yeah,
And
it
it
makes
takes a lot of power.
what you're taught in school, or my poor education that I received, what you're taught in school, and then like you find out in reality, and like, oh, there's the whip, and he's going to go whip up votes, and really it is just like browbeating and threatening, and then promising more money in the future for what, and like you don't even care if that person supports it, like you're just there to get a vote. It's like, you need to vote for me for prom king because other guy's a nerd. Like, don't vote for him. And they're like, whatever, man. Like, fine. Like, well, I'll give you $10 later. And like, what? Sure, sure. Like, you cannot break like all the votes. They'll show them on C-SPAN, and it's like, wow, amazing. All the Republicans voted one way, all the Democrats voted the other way. Like, you guys are just a hive mind, and none of this is just like, we can't solve any of this.
Yeah, it's rough. It's
Yeah,
rough.
it's just it almost like intentional chaos to put us in like disarray and then hand them over more power. Be like, oh, if I only give you more, I'm sure you could fix it. And like taking the little that we even have left. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah,
All right,
I
look,
remember this is many years ago, so I don't know what the current stats are, but I remember when American Idol came out and the voting participation they got, where I was like, oh man, if only we could get people to participate like that for people who are going to make laws. But they're so excited to vote for a singer on a television show.
I need to get Clay
And I think,
Aiken and Kelly Clarkson. I need to make sure they get record deals and make millions. I need the text now. Text my vote.
yeah. And those were the only seasons I knew. It's been a while since
Yeah.
I've seen that show. But anyway, I think I cut you off. What were you going to
No,
say?
I who knows? I'm always rambling about something. I just, our whole system needs this giant overhaul that they can't even agree on like voters' rights or their laws. And it's like, if you say something else and like, no, that's obviously racist. You just said that. Like, I'm sorry. Like, can we make sure that whoever's voting should be voting? Like, that's just the bare minimum. Like, are you allowed to vote? Yes or no? And like, you are not allowed to ask some people that is infringing upon their human rights. Like, no, it's not. You're allowed to say like legal votes only, whatever that might be. Chicago. Hey, Chicago, right? We're talking about city of Chicago, right? Got Kennedy elected pretty much because the mob and people dead on the voter rolls. Like, this is like it's a joke. Like, that's a real joke. And they're like, but we're not allowed to talk about that now. Like, that whole thing is just crazy talk.
I do love to bring things back to Chicago. We are,
Yeah,
they call us the city that works. They call us the city of big shoulders. And I think in many ways, both of those things could be tied back to organized crime. Possible, possible.
they
Um,
had when I was there, they had, I don't know if I ever did it or not. There was a tour you could do, and it would take you to all the mobster hangouts, and then where the St. Valentine's Day massacre was, you could pull up there and like have a drink there. And I so wanted to do that, and I feel like just timing didn't work out. But I was very excited for that.
well, and back to the research that I did for this play, I I suppose I knew a little bit of this, but so much of Chicago politics was Irish and Italian, and aldermen and like the Chicago machine was so tight, like fire, police, city government, and were very much due to Italian and Irish influence, which also meant being Catholic. And the particular church that I was researching was Presbyterian, which was highly Scottish and German, highly huge German influence. And so in Chicago, because immigrant ethnic communities and religion were so wrapped up, you often ended up with republicanism in the 20th century being very much a white European, like German, Scottish, English kind of thing. And then Democrats in Chicago being Irish and Italian, and also more likely to be part of city government. And those wars were very much fought through the 20th century. And this little tidbit didn't make it into my play because it was the wrong time period, but I want to tell this little story about how one of the church council members of the Fourth Presbyterian Church went to Al Capone's office one day specifically to say, hey, can you please not interfere with the Republican primary election for this particular ward? Like, do you mind? And somehow Capone was like, okay. And he like got, I don't know, I wasn't there and there's not enough documentation to know, like, how did this meeting, how did he walk in there? How did he not get killed? How did he persuade Al Capone? But they were just so accustomed to an Irish Catholic or Italian Catholic mafia interference with primaries that they just had to like go to the source and be like, listen, can you just let it be? Can we just vote for real this time? And apparently Capone said yes, and he got that done. Maybe he gave him something that he wanted. I don't know.
I would say that's probably definitely. It'd be interesting to see what policies if you were able to track it down to the exact candidate and what happened, like what policies were before and then what happened after, and how that definitely would have favored Capone.
Yeah. Yeah, old Scarface. I live just a couple blocks from his favorite nightclub, the Green Mill, which is still running strong.
That's awesome. I just love the history of Chicago. Philadelphia has old bars, and it's fun to go around there. But there's just parts of Chicago of like the speakeasies, and you're like, oh, actually, it's all these down these steps and then here, and it's like so cool to have that there, and some of them still functioning.
Philly and Chicago really are sister cities in that we have deep, deep history and a lot of diversity and a lot of history from so many different neighborhoods. There's a lot of wonderful kinship there, I think.
You guys have the Midwest charm and niceness, where Philadelphia just has the East Coast like bitterness, and we're always mad about everything.
I do love the Midwest. We're a little conflict averse. We could probably be better at actually talking about our problems, but I do like being Midwest nice. I embrace it.
Well, you're talking about like, Irish Catholic, heritage there, and that's just bury everything down and never admit anything and just deal with it all later.
Really? Is that right?
That's it. Never admit anything. Everything's fine. Just keep going, and it's just a slow simmer of like depression and anger, like right underneath the surface.
Oh, see, that sounds like German Lutheranism to me from Minnesota. But we have so much in common.
Yeah, this must just be like religious undertones for everybody. Like everyone's just at their boiling point of just suppress. Everything's okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's been really amusing to me when I've got Catholic friends and Jewish friends in the same room and they're all trying to claim like whose religion is better at guilt. It's like, listen, friends, nobody has a monopoly on guilt.
There's enough to go around for everybody.
Get at it.
Yeah, that's it. If there wasn't guilt, that's what drives people to do better. Like, I'm not going to hell, so I'm going to be nice to this person today. I'm not going to flip them off in traffic because I don't want to have, a sin that I think I can confess to.
Yeah. And those questions of the afterlife, right? It's amazing how in some instances they are so motivating and they end up being the linchpin of like, what happens after we die is the most important question we need to ask. And part of that is, how do we prepare to die? And how do we deal when people die? Like, those are really deep questions. And other times that gets thrown to the side and it's like, it doesn't matter. Once you're dead, you're dead. What are we doing right now? What are we doing while we're alive? That is all that matters. Whether there's a heaven or a hell or there's nothing, what matters is what are we doing with our lives? And I can feel that pendulum swing in my own brain and in my own heart, and I see it happening in community discussions too. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's interesting. And the long-term goal that if you have, you're starting the 1 yard line of football and you have to go down 99 yards, it's easier to be like, well, none of this counts unless you score a touchdown. So if you are, I'm good for today, like I'm doing great, I'm so proud of myself. Yeah, no, but you're not dead yet. Like you need to make it to heaven. Like make sure you stick on top of this and keep going. And if you're trying to live, I'm living my best life, but if you're trying to live your best life for today and do your most good for today, and tomorrow I'm going to try to do the same and maybe get a little bit better, that takes away from that, even though it all kind of, builds to the same thing. I think it's easier to, if you're using religion as a control, it's easier to say, hey, everything you do doesn't matter, because at the one time you slip up, that could be your sin that's going to have you go to hell. And if you don't atone for it and you get in a car accident and die, hey, sorry, I get that, like you were Mother Teresa, but also you flipped the guy off in traffic and now you're going to hell for the rest of your life.
Oh, harsh.
Yeah. So, but for the afterlife itself, so I was baptized. I'm a saved soul here, so that's good as a baby. Yeah. My children are not. I just don't think it matters at this point. Like, there's no way. So I said, we were church shopping, whatever we're doing. It's like, I don't know what we want to do, but my kids are good people. And at the end of the day, I don't see this being like a God, because even knows I'm back in the right, we said this earlier. How do I know I'm back in the right horse? Like, I have to hope that I am. But if all this comes down to like Muhammad was the main guy, like I didn't do one thing for him,
Yeah.
like, and they're going to be like, hey, sorry, man. Like you're just gone. Like you should, why didn't you follow the major majority in the world? Like you're the one picking the obscure one, like, I get it. I hear you. I just find that to be, an unjust world to live in. And hey, no one ever said God was just, so I don't know. But kind of just think if you live that good life,
some
you do that
people
good
do
thing.
believe that God is very just. That is a big tenet of many faiths. Not all of them, and many of them do believe in justice. They just disagree about what justice means.
Right.
But you brought up atonement, which is this major theological principle that is debated very specifically in the time that I wrote this play about, which is this idea that because sin exists, there must be a sacrifice in order to appease God's anger. And that is very specifically one of the things my guy, David Swing, was preaching against, which is that like Jesus didn't have to die to appease God's wrath. Jesus coming and sacrificing himself was a demonstration of love to inspire us, to inspire forgiveness, that even under the worst of circumstances, and I'm not even sure how much David Swing understood the oppression of Rome, the oppression of the Jews underneath Roman Empire and Jesus being executed by the Roman state. But he certainly was saying that in the worst of circumstances and in the worst of pain, he chose to do this to demonstrate love, and that should inspire us. It's not that without it, God hates us. God loves us. That was like one of his major things. He's like, listen, atonement, there's a premise there that's really dark and unjust, that we need to atone for anything. Not that sin isn't real and not that we shouldn't say sorry when we screw up, but that Jesus is not about somehow, I suppose I think I'm repeating myself at this point, but it's just that Jesus's love calls us to love rather than, oh, don't worry about it. You were a horrible sinner and you should have gone to hell. But since I did this thing, you don't have to. You're welcome.
That's not what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, he was challenging that in 1874. And universalism, right, which is the idea that, like, listen, probably we all end up in heaven if there is one. Like, that's the more just thing, is that, like, all souls are souls. And whatever happened to us while we were alive, that there's some way to come around. And if there's an afterlife, we're all going to make it there. Now, my guy wasn't a universalist specifically. He very much believed in hell. But that idea of universalism has been combating atonement from a lot of different pulpits. Even Christian denominations, and I'm assuming all religions, have some sort of flavor of universalism in them from a certain sect.
So you can watch Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ. I think I only made it through it once, and I have no interest in ever watching what they did to this poor man. You can feel, however you want about Jesus, Son of God, whatever. There's pretty solid information that he was at least a real person, and these things did happen to this person. It is an hour and a half snuff film, 2 hour snuff film that is like horrible. And for him to still have forgiveness at the end is crazy. When I'm at Six Flags and some lady cuts in front of me, I'm the Karen being like, eject her, eject her. Zero forgiveness for anybody.
Yeah. I mean, anger is real.
No, this is the bubbling underneath the surface. That's what we talked about, the suppression of it all. And then all it takes is one person to be like, there's law and order, and it is stand in this horrible line for 37 minutes to ride the new Batman ride. What are you talking about?
Yeah, we all feel self-righteous anger and or completely selfish anger at some points in our lives.
I have a lot of that going on. So your play, what are the next steps? When is this going? Is this going on now? What's happening?
The play will have 2 staged readings with some of my favorite Chicago actors in May 5th and 7th. May 5th is a Sunday, the Cinco de Mayo. May 5th at 3:00 and Tuesday, May 7th at 7:30 p.m. Both readings are free and both readings will be streamed. So if you can't make it to Chicago, you can catch the stream. The readings will be taking place at the First United Methodist Church in Chicago. If you've ever been in Chicago Loop, there's this incredible high rise with an incredible sky chapel at the top. We're doing the reading on the first floor in the sanctuary. This is right across from Daily Plaza where they do Chris Kindle Mart. I'm just trying to drop all these Chicago references for your listeners.
Keep it going. That's right.
So it's right in the middle of the Loop. It's a gorgeous sanctuary. We've got incredible Chicago actors, and they're going to do a reading for the public. I'm hoping that religious groups will come and listen to the story and want to talk about it. I'm hoping theater people will come because this is a theater town and it's a good play. I'm hoping everybody will come. And, who knows? Maybe some producers might come and think, oh, I've got to do this.
I hope so. I hope the best for you with that. I like that it's streaming, so I'll be able to catch that. I don't know if I'll be able to make it out May 5th or 7th, but streaming, I can handle that. All right. Where can people find you? What is the best way to get more information, to stay up to date?
Sure. My website is catevansllc.com, and you can find all things about me and my work, my writing there. If you just want to grab tickets to this reading, which is Perseverance of the Saints, you can go to Eventbrite. The tickets are already up there and they're free. Grab one whenever you want. You don't need a ticket to watch the stream, though. That'll just be on YouTube.
Okay, I will just have that stream for the YouTube. I will not take up occupy your ticket space. I will put all your links in the show notes so people can get to you. I think that's awesome. I think that's great. Do you have any other roads you want to cover?
Oh, wow. This has been such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure to talk theology and philosophy and politics and our current state. And we don't even know each other. Thank you so much for a great discussion.
No, thank you for coming on. You ever want to come back on? You definitely have other projects you want to come on and talk about. I'm here for, and then also just the current state of the world and how we're might be spinning in the opposite direction. But we'll figure that out.
Possible. It's been a pleasure dancing with you today.
Thank you so much for coming on, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.
Take care. Bye. All right, everyone. That was our show. Don't forget to leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you stream your podcast. Like and follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date in all things wild and weird. Check out the links in the show notes for more information on our guests. The biggest support you can offer is to tell everyone about the podcast. Until next time.